They say the mountains have eyes. That's a quaint little piece of folklore people tell themselves. But what they don't tell you is what happens when you find yourself in a place so isolated, so completely cut off, that you can feel those eyes on you from the room next door. A room that's supposed to be empty. A room where the key is already in the lock, just waiting for someone to turn it. Section 1. The Long Road to Nowhere. My story begins on a Tuesday in late October. I was driving from Michigan down to North Carolina, chasing a job opportunity that felt more like a last resort. The miles just bled together, a hypnotic cycle of gray road, yellow lines, and the endless rolling expanse of the Appalachian Mountains closing in around me. By the time I crossed into Western Virginia, the sun was a dying ember on the horizon, and a bone-deep exhaustion had settled into my muscles. My GPS had lost its signal hours ago, leaving me to navigate by a series of fading, hand-painted signs pointing towards smaller and smaller towns. That's when I saw it. The sign was for the Whispering Pines Motel. The paint was peeling, and the P in Pines flickered with a sickly, intermittent buzz, but the word vacancy glowed with a steady, welcoming light. It was set back from the road, a long, L-shaped building that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1960s. It wasn't just a building. It felt like a relic, a forgotten piece of roadside Americana left to slowly decay. The isolation was total. No other cars, no other signs of life for miles. Just the motel, the encroaching forest, and me. I pulled into the gravel parking lot. There were only two other vehicles. One was a beat-up sedan that looked like it belonged to the owner. The other was a cherry-red pickup truck from the 70s, clean and well-kept, but parked oddly in the farthest corner of the lot, half shrouded by the low-hanging branches of a massive oak tree. It was the kind of detail that lodges in your brain for no good reason. I noted it, and then I dismissed it. The office door creaked open into a small, wood-paneled room that smelled of stale coffee and pine sol. An elderly woman with a tight gray bun and a face etched with a permanent, weary disinterest sat behind the counter. She didn't smile or greet me, just pushed a registration card across the worn linoleum. I filled it out, my hand aching from gripping the steering wheel. "Just one night?" she asked, her voice a dry rasp. "Yes, ma'am, just one." She took my cash, counted it slowly, then slid a key across the counter. A real key, a heavy brass thing attached to a large red plastic diamond with the number 7 stamped on it. "Room 7, she said, pointing vaguely to her left. "End of the line, key's already in the door, just turn it." I paused. "The key is in the door?" She just stared at me, her eyes flat and empty. "That's what I said." The exchange was unsettling, but my fatigue was a powerful sedative. I just wanted to sleep. I grabbed the key, gave a nod that she didn't return, and walked back out into the cool, damp night air. The red pickup truck sat silently in its corner, a brooding, inanimate presence. As I walked down the long, covered walkway, I noticed the other rooms. The curtains were drawn tight on all of them. No lights, no sounds of TVs or muffled conversations. The place felt deserted, abandoned even, except for that single stoic truck. When I got to room 7, sure enough, a tarnished brass key, identical to the one in my hand, was sticking out of the lock. I hesitated, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. Why leave a room unlocked? Why give me a key for a door that already had one? Every instinct screamed at me to get back in my car and drive, to sleep at a gas station if I had to. But the pull of a real bed was stronger. I told myself it was just a quirk of a strange old motel. I turned the key that was already there, heard the lock click open, and pushed the door into the darkness beyond. Section 2. The Weight of the Silence. The room was clean. That was the most surprising thing. The bed was neatly made with a faded floral comforter. The cheap landscape painting on the wall was perfectly straight. There was no dust on the nightstand. It was sterile, impersonal, and utterly devoid of character. But as the door clicked shut behind me, another feeling washed over me, something heavier than the scent of disinfectant. It was the silence. It wasn't just quiet, not in the way a city street is quiet at 3 a.m. This was different. A profound, absolute void of sound you only find deep in the mountains. Storytellers say the Appalachian night has a unique, almost sentient silence, thicker and more oppressive than any you'd find in nature. It pressed in on you, amplifying every tiny noise. The hum of the ancient mini-fridge sounded like a generator. The creak of my own footsteps on the thin carpet was like a gunshot. I locked the door, sliding the deadbolt and fastening the flimsy chain lock. It didn't make me feel any safer. I walked over to the window that faced the parking lot. Peeking through a crack in the drab, beige curtains, I could see my car, the dim light of the office, and the red pickup truck, still parked in the shadows. It hadn't moved, and I saw now that it had no license plates. I tried to use my phone. No signal, of course. The isolation is a key part of the terror in these places. Help is always far away, and technology is useless. I was well and truly alone. Or, at least, I should have been. I took a quick shower, the sound of the water a welcome relief from the oppressive quiet. As I dried off, I heard something, a faint scraping sound. It seemed to come from the wall that connected my room to room 6. I froze, listening, my heart hammering against my ribs. It stopped as suddenly as it started. It's just the pipes, I told myself. Old building, old plumbing. But it hadn't sounded like pipes. It sounded like a piece of furniture being dragged slowly across a floor. I got into bed and tried to read a local tourist pamphlet I'd picked up earlier. It was filled with articles about the region's history and folklore. I read about the Brown Mountain Lights, mysterious glowing orbs people have reported seeing for centuries. Some legends say they're the spirits of ancient Cherokee women searching for their lost loved ones. I read about local tales of haints, restless and often malevolent spirits that haunt old, isolated buildings. The stories, meant to be charmingly spooky, did nothing to soothe my nerves. They only gave a name to the formless dread that was beginning to coalesce in the room with me. I turned off the light. The darkness was absolute. My eyes struggled to adjust, finding no comfort in the gloom. The silence returned, heavier this time, suffocating. I lay there for what felt like hours, my senses on high alert. And then I heard it again. This time, unmistakable. A soft thump against the adjoining wall. I sat bolt upright, my breath caught in my throat. I strained my ears, listening into the crushing silence. Nothing. Had I imagined it? Was my exhausted mind just playing tricks on me? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone checked into room 6, but I hadn't seen anyone. I hadn't heard a car arrive or a door open. Then came another sound, a slow, rhythmic tapping. Tap, 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 right on the other side of the headboard. It was deliberate. It wasn't the building settling. It was someone. Someone was in room 6, and they knew I was there. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through my fatigue. I slid out of bed and crept toward the connecting door. Most motels have them, a flimsy wooden door locked from both sides. I pressed my ear against the cool wood, my own breathing roaring in my head. For a long moment, there was nothing but that thick, listening silence. And then, I heard breathing, slow, deep, and raspy. It was so close, it felt like it was on my side of the door. I snatched my head back as if I'd been burned. This was real. I was not alone. The feeling of being watched, a classic motif in these tales of Appalachian dread, wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a certainty. Someone was in the room next to me, a room that was supposed to be empty. And they were quiet. Too quiet. They were listening. Just like me. Section 3, The Eye in the Wall. Sleep was impossible. I spent the rest of the night huddled in the armchair in the corner, watching the faint outline of the connecting door in the darkness. The tapping had stopped, the breathing had vanished, but the presence remained. It was a palpable weight in the air, a silent, knowing pressure from the other side of the wall. I must have dozed off, because I was startled awake by the first weak light of dawn filtering through the curtains. The gray light did little to dispel the fear. It only painted the cheap room in shades of misery. My only thought was to get out. Immediately. I gathered my things, my hands shaking as I shoved clothes into my bag. But I needed to see. I needed some confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. I walked to the window and carefully parted the curtains again. The parking lot looked the same. My car, the manager's sedan, and the red pickup truck. It was still there, a silent sentinel in the morning mist. But something was different. The curtain in the window of room 6 was now slightly open, just a sliver. In the deep shadow of the opening, I couldn't see anything clearly, but I was certain someone was standing there, watching. My blood ran cold. I didn't wait. I unfastened the chain and the deadbolt, my fingers fumbling with the locks. I didn't bother going to the office to return the key. I practically ran to my car, threw my bag in, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turning over felt like the loudest sound in the world. As I pulled out, I couldn't resist one last look at the window of room 6, and that's when I saw it. For just a fraction of a second, the curtain moved, and I saw a face. It was pale and gaunt, with dark, hollowed-out eyes. It wasn't the old woman from the desk. It was a man, and his eyes were locked on mine. There was no expression on his face, no anger, no curiosity, just a flat, predatory stillness. He watched me drive away. I peeled out of the gravel lot onto the empty mountain road, my heart pounding. I drove for miles, pushing the car way too fast on those winding roads, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds. I was terrified I'd see that red pickup truck appear behind me. But the road remained empty. About 30 minutes later, I pulled into the first gas station I found. The fluorescent lights and the presence of another human being felt like a lifeline. While filling my tank, I tried to calm down. It was just a creepy motel, I told myself. A weird local staring out a window, nothing more. But I couldn't shake the feeling of profound wrongness. The key already in the door, the silent plateless truck, the deliberate noises from the next room, the hollow-eyed man. It felt coordinated. It felt like a trap I had narrowly escaped. There are plenty of real-life accounts of stalkers and intruders at remote motels. Was I almost one of them? I paid for my gas and a coffee. As I was leaving, I saw a local newspaper on the counter. The headline sent a fresh jolt of ice through my veins. Local man missing for 2 weeks. Police suspect foul play. The article was short. A man had disappeared after telling his family he was heading into the mountains for a short camping trip. His car was found abandoned on a logging road, not 10 miles from the Whispering Pines Motel. The picture showed a smiling, healthy-looking man in his 40s, and parked behind him in the photo, partially obscured but still recognizable, was his truck, cherry red. The second key. My breath hitched. It couldn't be, just a coincidence. But my mind was spiraling, connecting dots that I prayed didn't form a picture. The truck, the missing man, the silent watching figure in his room. My hand went to my pocket, and my fingers closed around the key to room 7, the heavy brass key on the red plastic diamond. I had taken it with me. I stared at it, the number 7 mocking me. Then, a thought, cold and horrible, bloomed in my mind. The other key. The one that had been left in the door. What was the point of giving me a second key? I walked back to my car on unsteady legs, the newspaper clutched in my hand. I sat in the driver's seat, my mind a frantic mess. Why give me a key when one was already there? It wasn't a lazy habit. It was a signal, a message. Was the man in room 6 the missing person from the newspaper? Or was he the person responsible for the man's disappearance? A captive or a captor? A haint from a local legend? Or something far more human and dangerous? Fugitives have been known to hide out in the deep woods and isolated shelters of Appalachia. Was this motel one of their hiding spots? And then, the most terrifying question of all settled in my gut with the weight of a tombstone. If the key in the door was for me, who was the key in my pocket for? I looked at it again. Heavy, solid, old. It wasn't just for room 7. It was an extra key for a room where a man was being watched or held or worse. Maybe the plan wasn't just for me to stay the night. Maybe it was intended for me to give to someone else, or for someone to take from me. I thought about the man in the window, the watcher. I suddenly understood that the motel wasn't just a building, it was a stage, and I had stumbled into the middle of a play where I didn't know my role. Was I the next victim? An unwitting accomplice? What was supposed to happen in the dead of that Appalachian night? I didn't want to know. I threw the newspaper onto the passenger seat. I started my car, and this time I drove the speed limit, my eyes fixed on the road, trying to blend in. I drove until the mountains began to recede in my rearview mirror, until the forests thinned and the world started to look normal again. But I didn't get rid of the key. I couldn't. It felt like evidence. It felt like a curse. The things that happen in the forgotten corners of the world often stay there, swallowed by the silence. Have you ever stayed in a place that just felt wrong? A motel where the quiet was too loud? Or where you got the unshakable feeling that you weren't alone? Let me know your own disturbing travel stories in the comments below. And if you want to hear more tales from the edge of the map, make sure you subscribe. I never went to the police. What would I tell them? That I stayed at a creepy motel and a guy looked at me out a window? That I had a bad feeling? They'd think I was crazy. I have the key to room 7 in a box at the bottom of my closet. Sometimes late at night, I take it out and hold it. It's cold and heavy, a solid piece of a nightmare I can't entirely convince myself was real. I got the job in North Carolina and I tried to forget, but I can't. I can't forget the weight of that silence, the feeling of being a specimen under a microscope. I can't forget the hollow eyes of the man in the window, and I can't stop thinking about the red pickup truck and the man who owned it. Sometimes I search online for his name, hoping for an update, but there's nothing. He's just gone. Vanished into the deep, dark woods of Appalachia, a region with a long history of disappearances and unsolved cases that just become local lore. I never stayed at a roadside motel again. Now, it's only brightly lit chain hotels in busy cities. But even there, in the sterile quiet of a room on the 15th floor, I sometimes hear it. A faint tapping from the other side of the wall, and I know that the silence of the mountains has an echo, and it followed me all the way down,